everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are talking about trauma bonding. Now, if you remember, I just did a video where I talked about catching the feels in BDSM relationships and how to tell what the feels are and how you should act on them. And at the very end of that video, I was just like, hey, trauma bonding is a thing that comes up sometimes. Just put a little pin in that. We will talk about it later. And today is that later. We are talking about trauma bonding today. We're going to talk about what it means, where it comes from, is it even applicable to BDSM, all of that good stuff. So let's go ahead and get into talking about it. Now, this is something that you will often hear from people who are anti-BDSM. People who think that BDSM is just inherently bad and toxic for relationships and that it just shouldn't be something that people are doing. And this will often go along with the same arguments that people make where they say that BDSM is bad because sexual masochistic disorder exists, and so that means that all masochists have a mental health issue and everyone here shouldn't be doing what they're doing because it's actually acting out a mental illness. And I made a whole other video where I talked about that, so go see the one where I talked about fetishes versus kinks. I go over it in there. But with this, more or less what they are saying is BDSM is trauma bonding. This is an abuse situation. This is something where you think you love your dom, but actually really your dom is your abuser and a bad person, and they are manipulating you into thinking that they love you and that you love them. Now, I don't want to just start from a position where I assume that this person is making an argument in bad faith, because I don't think that's always the case. I think some people who are anti-BDSM are genuinely concerned about people's well-being. They are honestly really truly thinking that this is an abuse situation, and they for some reason think that leaving comments on the internet is going to help get people out of abuse situations. I don't know. I want to assume that these people mean well and are actually really afraid that BDSM is an abuse situation and that it is actually trauma bonding. And I don't really know how these people actually picked up on the term trauma bonding to apply it to BDSM, but what is curious is I've also heard kink educators say the same thing, like almost in kind of a joking way, like, oh, then BDSM's just trauma bonding, like almost kind of making a joke out of it, which is so weird to me. So clearly there's two very different groups of people who say that BDSM is trauma bonding. But is there actually any truth to that statement in the first place? Can you actually call BDSM trauma bonding? The term trauma bonding, unsurprisingly, actually comes to us from the world of psychology and the study of abuse. The term was popularized by Patrick Carnes in his 1997 book, The Betrayal Bond: Breaking Free from Exploitative Relationships. And he used the term to describe the misuse of fear, excitement, sexual feelings, and sexual physiology to entangle another person. But more broadly, it is the use of intermittent reinforcement patterns of reward and punishment, which then creates a deep and entrenched bond. Intermittent reinforcement basically means that you're not sure what's going to happen when you do something. You might do something and get a reward. You might not get anything at all. It's something where you're never really sure exactly what's going to happen. Trauma bonding is powerful because of the way that it actually works on our brains. It's very interesting because if you actually look at it, when we are reinforcing something, it actually creates less of a regular response to have a reward every single time something happens. Our brains actually are more wired to respond to something where we don't always know if we're going to get rewarded every single time we do something. We will work harder for something that is inconsistent. And what that can mean in relationships is we choose to stay in relationships that aren't working because we are hoping to get back to the good times. We're hoping to get back to that honeymoon phase. It's the very classic, oh, but I know he's such a good guy on the inside and I'm just going to stick with him because I know he can be really sweet. And I remember that one time on my birthday, he got me this wonderful gift and he got me flowers last week. And you're always trying to get back to that good point, even if you don't always know that's actually going to happen. But what does this intermittent reinforcement, what does this unknown schedule of reward and punishment have to do with BDSM? Well, I think we need to then look at the characteristics of a healthy BDSM relationship, of a functional BDSM relationship. Typically, that usually involves things like negotiating limits and boundaries and setting up the parameters of the relationship. There will be clearly defined rules and structure. If someone does choose to involve reward and punishment directly in a BDSM relationship, the things that will cause rewards and punishments will be clearly outlined. And not only that, but oftentimes people will discuss what the rewards and punishments will exactly be. And then ideally, the dominant acts on these reward and punishment frameworks as negotiated whenever they happen, because that helps actually maintain the dynamic. Many relationships also have protocols for things like porch time, which indicates a time in the relationship where you can go outside of the dynamic to talk about it without fear of repercussion or punishment for the things that you say. And then ideally, you would also have safe words, which means that either party can end what is happening, and also that someone can choose to leave the relationship without fear of physical harm or backlash afterwards. And from this list, we can see that having clearly defined boundaries, upfront negotiation, ongoing communication, a clear understanding of exactly what is going on is the framework for having a BDSM relationship. It is the thing that makes it work. If there is not transparency, a healthy BDSM relationship, in my mind, is not really possible. While something like intermittent reinforcement might be present in some dynamics, it is certainly not typical and certainly not the goal for most kink dynamics. I would even go so far as to say that BDSM actively tries to avoid trauma bonding because it is so upfront and so transparent with its communication, understanding of exactly what is part of the relationship structure with rewards and punishments and things of that nature. And assuming people are following those guidelines and the relationship is actually a healthy, functional BDSM relationship, I can't really think of a rational reason why you would call it trauma bonding. If trauma bonding is the result of intermittent reinforcement, and then intermittent reinforcement isn't present, if that kind of abuse and manipulation isn't present, then I don't think you can call it trauma bonding because it doesn't fall under the definition. But if it's so obvious that those two aren't related at all, why do so many people insist on saying that BDSM is trauma bonding? I think one is maybe a misunderstanding of what the term trauma bonding even means. I think some people take trauma bonding to mean any time you are in a committed relationship with somebody who is being manipulative or abusive towards you. And I think if we take that assumption, that then means that people think that BDSM must be trauma bonding because BDSM is inherently abusive and manipulative. I mean, why would anyone want to give up all their control over their finances? Why would someone want to be hit in that way? How in the world can someone truly consent to only being allowed to be naked in the home, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And name any rule in BDSM, someone will probably take issue with it and call it abuse or manipulation. And not even necessarily looking specifically at relationship structure, I think people stereotype BDSM as being, whips and floggers and chains and blood and crying. And I think someone just thinks about that and they visualize domestic violence. And because of that potential superficial stereotype similarity to domestic violence, that then means that people believe that things that relate to domestic violence then also apply to BDSM relationships. Because again, hey, how could anyone possibly consent to all of that? How in the world could this ever be a healthy relationship? How in the world could this not be abuse? And so I think that is just really from a place of ignorance, of understanding what healthy BDSM relationships look like, as well as a misuse of a term based on an assumption of what that term must mean. But what is even more interesting is when people who are in the kink community use the term trauma bonding, especially kink educators who have used it. I might have even used it flippantly once or twice myself, I don't know. But I think what happens here is definitely a misunderstanding of what trauma bonding is and the bit of the term that means trauma. The best guess that I have is in the kink world, if we're talking about impact play, pain, etc., that gets kind of categorized as like trauma. And we know that scene highs, that all of those good feelings subspace happen. And that, I think people just like project that onto trauma bonding. Like, yes, trauma bonding. The thing that happens when you go through a lot of pain and then you have a lot of intense emotional feelings and then you feel closer to someone. That's what trauma bonding is, because it's got the word trauma in it and it's got the word bonding in it, and I think I know what those two words must mean. And that's the best guess that I have, is just like assuming certain words mean things that they don't mean, and I can kind of understand making a little bit of a joke out of it if it's something where, you know, we're just trying to cope with people misunderstanding what BDSM is, and it's kind of just like a little in-joke maybe about a stereotype that some people have, but I don't necessarily think that it's necessary to do that or accurate to do that, or it should be something that we keep doing. Toxic relationships do exist. Abusive relationships do exist. There are abusive, manipulative, toxic, bad BDSM relationships. But that doesn't mean that all BDSM relationships are bad. And I don't think that it is appropriate to paint all of BDSM with this really broad brush of it all being just trauma bonding. Because for the most part, as we have clearly defined and shown in this video, BDSM is not trauma bonding. It is not trauma bonding. It's not trauma bonding. That's all I can really say. So hopefully this helped answer some of your questions. Hopefully this helped you understand some terminology a lot better. If you want to read more about this, if you want to check my sources, links to that will be down in the description box below. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions you want to share, you can do that down in the comment section below as well. If you really enjoyed this, if you want to see more content from me, the best way you can do that is to subscribe to this channel. That allows you to see every video that I post when a new one comes up. Maybe, but you should probably also press the notification bell, because who even knows what's going on with YouTube these days? If you want to support my work, the way you can do that is through Patreon. That's what makes this entire channel possible, because without Patreon, I would not be doing YouTube full time, and it is a great way to get a lot of extra content. There are photo shoots, there are exclusive videos, there are video previews, so if you want to check out any of that, I highly recommend you do. Link to that will also be down in the description box below. If you already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me, and until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.